Have you ever noticed this? You are scrolling through Instagram or otherwise just finding artists online, and you're seeing this over and over. Self-taught. Why is it that so many people who make it in the arts industry are self-taught? I will tell you why. It is because the academic structure is not a natural place for art to exist. And for that, art school is the villain in my story. I went to art school at the time of making this video 4 years ago, and for a long time I would say I held memories of art school very kindly. I absolutely loved every single second of being in art school. I built lasting relationships, had amazing experiences, learned a lot about the art world as a culture, and also had a dedicated 4 years of my life to focus on art and nothing else. And yet, once I left school, being creative was suddenly so hard. I remember being 9 or 10 years old, drawing and painting every single day in my room. Before I had specific instruction, I was the most creative I've ever been, and now, not so much. So what changed? I'll tell you what changed. I went to art school. Hey there, welcome in. If you're just now joining, you're joining at a fun time because this is an unhinged rant about art school. My name is Jen Carmiel and I am an artist and a painter in the Columbia, South Carolina area. Welcome to my studio. Before we get started, hit the like button and subscribe because it helps. And that also just lets me know that you want more unhinged art rants. I also wanted to say that I recently made a bunch of super cute and cozy watercolor paintings, and if you like Target sprees, self-care, journaling, I really do think that you would like this art. It looks really amazing in kitchens, and someone even purchased one for their bathroom lately, which I think is amazing. That is so much fun. So anyway, if you would like your very own painting shipped to your door, go ahead and follow the link in the description. I ship out artwork every Friday or sooner. Prints are also in there if you want a more budget-friendly option. Now, how did we get here? Is art school really all that bad? There's pros and cons for sure. Like I said, I built lasting relationships in art school, and given the option, I would go again. But after working as an artist after art school, it put some important things in perspective, let's say. I came to the realization that I do not believe art school is a natural or appropriate place for art to exist. I'm going to explain exactly what I mean by that a little bit later, but first let me explain what art school is and what it looks like for people who might not know. So there are two different kinds of art school. There is a state school with an art program, or there's a full-on art school where all they teach is art. In state schools, you major in art, and you have a concentration in your desired medium, but you're still required to learn all mediums. So I have my Bachelor of Fine Arts with a concentration in painting, but I still studied sculpture, woodworking, metalworking, weirdly enough, photography, animation, illustration. I studied all art mediums regardless of what I was actually interested in pursuing. I don't want to get off topic, but I have thoughts and opinions on that. They're good thoughts and opinions. I think it was a cool thing, and I think it was beneficial, but that's for another video. Comment below if you want that video. So in the other kind of art school, the full-on art school, you major in your art of choice, meaning you major in illustration, you major in animation, rather than art concentration in whatever your desired medium is. I went to the first one, so I went to a state school, and my university had 3 art galleries on campus for us to exhibit in. It was awesome. They had fine artists that came in every week for artist talks, which means that we had the opportunity to interact with and talk to working professional artists every single week at our campus. We also went to demonstrations by artists. We went on museum tours by curators who helped discuss what exactly goes on in museums. So we would go into like these back rooms, and then they'd be like, here's all of our artwork that's not currently being displayed and we just store here. I think I saw something by like Oscar Wilde there or something, which is super cool. Shout out to Leslie, who runs the CAM, the Contemporary Art Museum at USF. Like, that was super fun. Suffice to say, it was really, really cool. I had an amazing time enriching experiences. I loved my time at art school. And so that's sort of what your art school experience looks like. Once you had your concentration picked out, you had a minimum of 4 additional classes within that concentration, meaning that you took advanced painting 4 times. So that's for 2 years, 1 for each semester. And in your final year, you work on what's called your thesis project. So that's where you choose a theme of art that you're going to create a series of, and then you are going to write a thesis paper using references, describing why you're making what you're making, and defending your art to the reader of the paper. Once you finish your thesis project, you get to exhibit your artwork in a museum with your peers who are also in your thesis class. When we created our group show together, it was called Out of Stock, and I chose a few of my paintings to be curated for that show that we would put on for our thesis. So that's sort of what it looks like when you go to art school. Then when you graduate, you go on your merry little way out into the world with no plan whatsoever on how to make it out there as a working artist. Yeah, I feel like the curriculum is kind of lacking. So clearly there are pros and cons. Pros, awesome environment, surrounded by like-minded people, dedicated time and attention towards your art practice. Cons, but what happens next? How do I apply all this into the real world once I leave the bubble? I don't know. I don't know, man. And rather than spending the video discussing the various pros and cons, because there are a lot, I wanted to talk about this one crazy realization I came to the other day at an art market. So I was sitting there at my booth, I was watching people walk by, look at my work, and when you're at an art market, there are one of 4 things that you see people do when they walk by. Number 1 is they walk right past your booth, no eye contact, not looking at you or your stuff, just walking, and you're like, okay, cool, no problem. Number 2 is they walk, but they slow down, but you can still tell by their body language they don't want you to talk to them. They're just kind of curious about what it is. They're curious but not interested. Number 3 is they walk by, stop, and look for a little while, and that's whenever you can be like, hey, by the way, I have some free stickers, you know, that you can give a little intro or something when they're stopping and actually looking at your stuff and interacting with it. The 4th one is they walk by, they stop, and they react or respond to your artwork. And that looks like someone walking up to your art booth and going, oh, I love that, or oh, look how cool that is, or sometimes they laugh at something that's supposed to like elicit laughter, I would hope at least, or they say, oh, my sister would love this, or they go grab their friend, they're like, oh, this is so you know, they interact and they react with your artwork. Sometimes they engage in dialogue with you. That's number 4. And number 4 is the feeling is indescribable. The feeling is indescribable. When I see someone laugh at a painting that's intended to elicit laughter, like point and show their friend, like that is artwork being alive. That is like watching something new be born right there in front of you. And I realized something watching that happen. I realized this is the natural state of art. An art school does not put your artwork in the correct context that it is meant to exist within, that it's meant to live within, that it's meant to thrive within. Art school is like taking a baseball bat to the stomach of your artwork. Art markets is like playing ball. So I have talked a little bit about the actual experience about art school and how that is super fun to be within. So that is you observing this world of art. There's another side where it is you creating your art and attempting to infiltrate that world. And when you're creating your artwork, you have to go through daily and weekly what's called art critique. And art critique is so detrimental, in my opinion, to the creative process for 2 reasons. 1, it is because it trains you to value the opinion of other people more than you value the artistic impulses that are already inside you. So rather than saying, oh, I wonder why I'm making this, why am I painting the same thing over and over, like what's there, and having a dialogue within yourself, instead you put it up, you don't even have that introspection, and you wait for other people to tell you what it means. It trains you to always be looking for that external validation. And so when you're removed from that world so quickly, suddenly it becomes very hard to interact with your artwork alone because you're so used to listening to other people's opinions and you're letting other people's opinions guide you in that. So that's number one. External validation becomes king of the creative process when you do art critique so often for years. The second one is because, this one shook my world when I realized it. When you hang up artwork in art critique, you are receiving feedback from artists, not your audience. Let me let that sink in for a second. Like, do you hear that? Do you hear that? You are receiving feedback from artists, not your audience. So what happens is artists interact with artwork very differently. When artists interact with artwork, they are thinking to themselves, what would I make? What choices would I do? They're looking at the tiniest little details and saying, what could be better about it? And there might be some small amount of value in that, but honestly, not enough to warrant the damage it does. Because when you spend several years of your life putting up your artwork, putting yourself out there, training yourself to only care about other people's opinions because they're giving you a grade for it, this is how you pass, right? So when you train yourself to only care about those other opinions, and those opinions don't have your best interests at heart, they're thinking about themselves, they're thinking about their practice, they're thinking about what they think good art is. And what is art but a state of play? What is art except expression? Art doesn't exist within a sphere of judgment. That's not what art is. Art is where you sit down with your Crayola markers and you color all over the table. That's what art is. Picasso is the one that said it took me 4 years to learn to paint like Raphael, but a lifetime to paint like a child. There is something so electric, magnetic, and magic about artwork when it is in the utmost state of play. And that is where the creative sweet spot is. That's where your flow state is. And art school critique teaches you to let go of play, which is so detrimental. It is why when I left art school, I almost couldn't be creative, because every time I sat down to be creative, I heard a cacophony of sound of voices in my head of every single thing that someone had ever said to me in critique, and every single thing was different. Every single person pointing you in a different direction. Let me paint you a picture. You are in a room made of what feels like cold, gray and white concrete. You hang up your artwork, and 20 plus people, your peers, gather around it in silence. You all stare at it. Occasionally, someone says something. I don't think that wet on wet technique is doing much for you there. I don't like the subject you painted. It doesn't seem quite finished. Once I was at an art critique and one of my peers said, something's missing. My professor said, what? I don't know, just something. Art critique is uniquely designed to create doubt, insecurity, and question in your head rather than confidence. It doesn't teach you any valuable skill because of who the feedback is coming from. You can learn skill easily by a teacher or through practice, repetition, and experimentation. There's nothing that I learned from art critique that made me a better artist. Nothing. It just creates this five-headed monster in your head, a monster that chases down your playfulness and vision and asks it what right it has to be there. I remember once I created this experimental kind of painting with some collage aspect of it. I hung it up super excited about it, and my professor immediately goes, that's nothing new. I've seen that before. And I'm like, okay. And I immediately pivoted in a different direction and did something else. But when I think back at that moment, I'm like, what impulse did I have that made me want to create that? I wonder what would happen if I continued to listen to that impulse for a full year. Where would that have been pushed? Where would that have gone? Critique trains you to second guess your instincts. Before art school, I had one thing in mind. Wow, this is so much fun. I love the colors, the pictures, the movements. I was this one big vision of what I would want to make. It felt like my artist voice was one unified voice. And anytime I went to create, that voice was one person that I talked to, that I'm like, oh yeah, this is fun, this is fun, this is cool, I'm grooving. And after I went to art school, that one voice became 1,000, and none of them were my own. And they were all echoing back and forth, all trying to tell me why what I was creating was wrong, was bad, needed to change. I couldn't even create something without first telling myself I shouldn't be making that in the first place. The most frequent critiques I hear in my head every time I go to create today is, it's too kitsch. Kitsch is not fine art. It means that you're creating something that's more like craft or not respectable or something like that. Or it's not fine art. Or what you're doing is nothing new. And who said it needed to be new? Whatever happened to art as an expression of play? And yet when I'm alone in my studio 4 years later, it's hard to start making moves because I'm thinking about what every single person wants my artwork to be. And the thing about being a modern artist, photography exists, you know, like there's so many ways that you can interpret and see the world with tools that we have nowadays. So your identity is really paramount to what you're creating as an artist. That's what makes it distinctive these days. And art school kind of trains you to not trust your identity as an artist because you're constantly listening to the feedback of people who don't know you, of people who would rather you create art in the way that they create art. Art school instills in you a resilient critic. It instills in you the need for validation constantly, for someone else's opinion to tell you that your art is worth it or not, because you're getting graded for it. So rather than learning to trust your own artistic impulses and instincts, you begin to question them before you even approach the canvas. With each critique, day after day, you question, as you finish this piece, what are they gonna say next? Instead of, this is awesome, I love it, do I like it? You know, that kind of thing. I remember during my time in art school, I began to get really into figure paintings, and I preferred to paint people without faces, not for a lack of ability, it's just what came naturally to me. I enjoyed the emphasis on the body. I felt like it made the figure more of a study, an object, not objectifying, but just, I guess maybe a little objectifying. But I didn't want it to be a person. I wanted it to be a symbol. I wanted it to symbolize some sort of emotion, or I wanted it to be not a character, not a person, not someone with a name. I didn't want you to create a narrative when you looked at it, is the thing. And one of my painting professors, after several years of working together and trying to get me to paint faces, said to me in a critique, in choosing not to paint faces, you display an inherent lack of skill. I'll just give that some air. Imagine having that said to you in front of an entire class from someone that you worked with for several years. And it's not like this person didn't know that I could paint faces, because they could. I mean, I painted this in his class actually. I'm gonna put up a little thing on the screen. I painted this in his class a couple years prior to this statement. So, and in saying that, they completely overlooked my impulse. Like, my impulse is too abstract. Like, I could paint faces if I wanted to. I could paint realistically if I wanted to. I could paint the way you want me to paint if I wanted to. But that is not the point of art. Now, is it? Tell me why so many professors try to gaslight the creative impulse out of you. And you don't know it when it's happening, because that's the whole meaning of the word gaslight. You don't know it when it's happening. You just think that you are getting a good grade, or you are learning more, you're becoming more skilled. But what you're doing is you're learning to adapt in that environment where that validation is necessary for you to survive. And then when you're removed from that bubble and you no longer have their voices physically there, you hear them in your head, and then it's very difficult to create independently. And frankly, I find it a very unnatural way to interact with artwork. For 20+ people to gather around in silence and just kind of coldly describe it and say what it should be instead of what it is, that's just not natural. The natural way, the natural way to interact with artwork is directly with the audience that is meant to see it, meant to hear it, meant to gain messages from it. And what that looks like is your art is displayed and people have the option to engage or not. They either walk right past or they choose to stay. And when I'm in critique and trying to incorporate that feedback, it feels unnatural because it's like trying to play to win a game. But when I'm incorporating feedback from art markets, this is what it looks like instead. I notice that people tend to like certain paintings more than anything else. Like, I have 1, 2, or 3 bestseller prints for I don't even know what reason. People just love them. They love this image. And I'm like, why? What about this image brings magic to your life? And I try to recreate that magic. I said, you like this. I wonder if it's the colors. So I create something else with those colors. I create something with that audience in mind. Or maybe it's my artwork is up and no one responds to one of my prints. And I'm like, okay, message received. This one is not resonating with my ideal audience. I'm gonna swap it out for something different. Isn't that so much more organic? So much more free and fluid to create in response to desire rather than response to judgment. Art school gave me a lot of amazing memories, enriching experiences. I had 3 art shows while I was there, but it honestly killed a lot of the free-spirited creativity that used to exist within me. Well, maybe not killed. I guess I'll say discouraged. It's still in there, coming out day after day, little by little. Maybe one day I'll remember the artist I used to be as a kid. But anyway, that's the video for today. I'm curious, did you go to art school? What are your thoughts on art school? Share them in the comments below. Let's have a conversation. If you enjoyed this video and want more like it, definitely hit like and subscribe. I will give Tazo and Alfie a treat for every subscribe I get through this video. I'm just saying. Anyway, as always, spending any amount of time here on this channel with me is a gift. It is truly a gift. I really do consider it a gift, and for that, this humble artist says thank you. I feel like my words are really being undercut by a cat right now. Alfie! Oh, the bug again. Yes, Alfie, yes! Come on. You got it, Alfie, you got it. Oh my gosh, I'm afraid. Alfie baby, just come here. I have to go get that cat. Tell me why she meows and then hides from me. I don't understand it. Subscribe to give Alfie a treat.